Do you recognise this wee stone by the side of a village road on the outskirts of Inverurie? You might have drove past it a few times and maybe wondered, what's with that big old stone sitting there? Well, what would you say if I told you that this stone represents an event that was one of the most defining moments in the life of one of Scotland's greatest ever kings? Would you believe me? History is full of moments where everything shifts. Cannae in 216 BC proved the military genius of the great Carthaginian general Hannibal when he brought Rome to the brink of near collapse. Austerlitz in 1805 cemented Napoleon Bonaparte's supremacy over Europe. The Battle of Bosworth in 1485 ended the War of the Roses. And for Robert the Bruce, King of Scots, a similar moment came on these fields here at Barra in Old Meldrum 717 years ago on 23rd of May 1308. And apparently he sat on this very stone here overlooking the battle, which is now known as Bruce's seat. Though the stone has since been moved from its original position, which was originally up on Barra Hill where Bruce apparently overlooked the battle. And we'll have a wee walk up there soon to have a look. This battle was a reckoning point against Robert the Bruce's greatest rivals, the Comyns, and victory here would allow him to solidify his hold on Scotland and allow himself to turn his full attention southward towards the English, which would eventually set him on the path to Bannockburn. But years before that epic battle happened, Robert the Bruce had unfinished business in Scotland, and the Battle of Barra would be his final showdown with the Comyns, who were a family who had been one of the main political powers in Scotland for around 150 years, going all the way back to the 12th century. So, let me tell you the story of what happened here. Following the death of Edward I in 1307, Bruce took the opportunity presented by a lack of attention from the English king, Edward II, to reduce internal opposition to his rule and take full control of the Kingdom of Scotland. One by one, Robert the Bruce confronted his domestic enemies, beginning with the Balliol party in Galloway. From the south of the country, he then moved through the English-held central lowlands, making his way by the western route through Argyllshire, through the Great Glen towards Inverness, and the northeast towards the territory held by Buchan. In the autumn and winter of 1307, Bruce attacked the strongholds of the Comyns and their supporters in the northeast, but fell ill at Christmas 1307. By May, he was still unwell and quartered outside Inverurie with John Comyn, the 3rd Earl of Buchan, mustering at Old Meldrum. John Barber, who was a Scottish poet and cleric who lived between 1320 to 1395, he is best known for his epic work, The Bruce, which tells the story of Robert the Bruce and his rise to power, including the Battle of Bannockburn. Barber's works are considered one of the most important medieval Scottish texts, providing a romanticised and patriotic account of Bruce's struggles against the English, and is a key source for understanding Scottish history and identity during this time. The Battle of Barra is also known as the Battle of Inverurie, but the battle's correct name is actually the Battle of Barra, so we'll go with that as historical accuracy is quite important, isn't it? The landscape of the Battle of Barra remains remarkably well preserved, despite changes in land boundaries and the significant growth of Old Meldrum since 1308. The field known as the Bruce Field, where an English billhook was reportedly found before 1845, offers a tangible link to the past. Remarkably, little development has actually occurred along the B9170 between Inverurie and Old Meldrum, which means the location of the battle likely remains largely undeveloped, giving us a clear sense of the terrain where the fighting may have took place. From the hill of Barra, you can imagine the Comyn line descending towards the land in front of Old Meldrum, likely in a position in a northwest-southeast alignment, with their left flank anchored on the slopes of the hill. Bruce's forces would have most likely came from the direction of Inverurie. In the morning of the 22nd or 23rd of May 1308, Sir David de Brecon, Comyn's ally, appeared on the outskirts of Inverurie so suddenly and unexpectedly that he slew some of King Robert's men, and others withdrew and fled towards the king, who was then lying with most of his force on the further side of the Don, outside Inverurie. On hearing this attack, although not completely recovered, Bruce called for his horse and ordered his men to prepare for battle. According to John of Fordun, writing in the 1360s to the 1380s, when Bruce heard that Comyn and Mowbray were at Inverurie, he commanded his men to arm him and put him on his horse, even though he was still sick. Barbour's poem has Bruce saying to his attendants, "Without doubt their insolence has made me more hale and sound. Through no medicine could have made me recover as quickly as they have done." Bruce and his men, who were heartened by his presence, then moved towards Old Meldrum from Inverurie, where the enemy lay. Buchan arrayed his men, presumably knights and men-at-arms, with some rabble behind them, and they waited. Bruce's army then formed up and marched towards Old Meldrum, where Comyn and Sir John Mowbray were drawn up below Barra Hill on the road from Inverurie into Old Meldrum. Comyn and his men were aware of Bruce's illness and seemed to have assumed that he would not be present in the fighting. However, when they saw the king come on bravely without hesitation, they apparently withdrew a wee bit from the front line, and Bruce most likely smelt the fear of his enemy, and at that point, recognising he had the advantage, he pressed on them with his banner, so they then retreated more and more. Bruce's presence on the battlefield, ready for battle, apparently made his opponents so afraid that it was noted as being the main reason they fled. So if you can put yourself in the shoes of the soldiers in the Comyn army, just for a second, and maybe try to think how they must have felt at that time, seeing Bruce's presence on the battlefield that day, maybe many more turned up to fight for the Comyns than would have done under the illusion that they wouldn't be fighting against Robert the Bruce. And many must have thought that Bruce had succumbed to illness, because that's what they would have been told. So you can imagine their shock when they see the mighty Bruce with his men and with his banners hoisted, marching towards them. Bruce, remember, was the man who defeated the might of the English army at the Battle of Loudon Hill a year earlier in 1307, with only around 600 men against the vastly superior English army of around 3,000 men. So they must have been proper crapping themselves at this point, and the legend of Robert the Bruce was already starting to rapidly grow, so no wonder they ran. And also, Bruce had begun to build up his reputation as a great tactician on the battlefield, and he was a bit of a military genius, quite frankly speaking, so you can't really blame those soldiers under the Comyn banners in fleeing. Bruce's army then charged what was left of the Comyn line, and the fighting very rapidly became a complete rout. Comyn fled towards Fyvie and then Turriff, finally making his way to England a few months later. Both armies comprised a mixture of armoured knights on horseback with a larger number of foot soldiers who were, in many cases, levies rather than professional soldiers. Bruce's men, however, were the more experienced and battle-hardened, having been on a campaign for an extended period of time already. There is very little information on numbers in the sources. Barbour puts the numbers of Bruce's army at the battle at around 700 men. McNair Scott, who was a 20th century historian, also confirms that Bruce had around 700 men, including Edward, the Earl of Lennox, Gilbert de la Haye and Robert Boyd, plus various knights of Moray, including William Wiseman and Sir David Berkeley. No actual figures are given in any of the sources, although there is a general perception that the Comyns lost heavily. It is likely that there were very few casualties for Bruce and that most of the killing took place in the pursuit of the fleeing Comyn soldiers. In common with most of the fighting of this period of Bruce's career, there are few historical records of the events, and what remains is a little bit sketchy. The result was that the average soldier of the lower rank in Comyn's army, seeing their lords then pull back, turned and completely scattered themselves. John Comyn, the 3rd Earl of Buchan, made some attempt to steady his line, but the lords then seeing this, fled themselves. Barber tells us that there was never so miserable an outcome after such a sturdy display, for when the king's companies saw that they fled so disorderly, they chased them with all their might and took some and killed others. The rest kept on fleeing with good horse and got away. The pursuit took place over a considerable distance, with Comyn fleeing for Turriff and being pursued at least as far as Fyvie, some 7 kilometres to the northeast. This victory at Barra and the manner in which the Comyns broke and ran ended any effective resistance in the northeast to Bruce. The rout is likely to have been back towards Old Meldrum behind the Comyn line, and then northwest in the direction of Fyvie and Turriff. Bruce then commanded his own living brother, Edward de Bruce, to lay waste to the earldom of Buchan, from end to end, including all the castles and strongholds. Principally Old Slains Castle, Rattray Castle, Dundar castles, as well as the castles that were in English hands, such as Fyvie Castle and Aberdeen Castle. Historical accounting by the historian Fordun says the following: when the rout was over, King Robert ravaged the earldom of Buchan with fire, and of the people he killed those of whom he would, and those who he would have lived he granted life and peace. Other historical accounts, decades later after the harrying of Buchan, as this event would later be known as, stated the following: that he harried them in such a way that a good 50 years afterwards, people bemoaned the devastation of Buchan and what came to be known as the hardship of Buchan. Following Comyn's retreat, Robert the Bruce then took full control of the north, ensuring all the lands were now under his rule. The lands of Buchan were the centre of Comyn power, and Bruce used his victory to ensure his control over this Comyn heartland. Bruce's control of the north, combined with successes later that year in Argyll and Galloway against his remaining opponents, meant that he now had full control over Scotland, apart from a few castles and towns still in English hands. Although Balliol was still alive, the St Andrews Parliament in 1309 upheld Bruce's right to the throne, despite the continued opposition of many who did not attend, and in the same year he was recognised as King of Scotland by the King of France. And after his defeat at Barra, John Comyn, the 3rd Earl of Buchan, and Mowbray fled to England, where they were granted refuge by the English King, Edward II. This would be the last time John Comyn would see Scotland, as he would die later that year in 1308 in England. The defeated John was the last of the Comyns to have any real political power in Scotland, and after the death of his namesake, John the Red Comyn, who was considered the last overall leader of the Comyn faction, that guy was killed on 10th of February 1306 when Robert the Bruce famously stabbed him to death at Greyfriars Church in Dumfries. Oof, there's definitely better ways to go. So, the combination of the Red Comyn's death in 1306 and the defeat of the 3rd Earl of Buchan at the Battle of Barra in 1308 effectively opened the door for Bruce to divide up Comyn lands amongst his supporters, effectively ending the power of the Comyns as a political force in Scotland, which they had been around for around 200 years since the 12th century. But now there were no more. The threat from England remained, however, and hostilities continued for many years, even after Bannockburn in 1314, up until the First Scottish War of Independence was finally concluded by the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton in 1328. So, thanks for watching the video, folks. I hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to do the usual, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and importantly, as always, leave a comment as a sacrifice to the algorithm, as comments are the ones that really help the videos grow on YouTube. So if you really like this video, then leaving a comment is a great way and sign of support to me, from you towards me. Whether it's a comment from any suggestions that you want to make about the next video, or anything you think I missed out in this video, or any general questions at all you have, please don't hesitate to drop a comment. Good, bad, funny, stupid, whatever. Just leave a wee comment for your pal Nico. And if you really liked the video, then feel free to leave a wee tip for a wee coffee or a wee cheeky pint for me in the comment tip section of the video. Thank you very much for watching. Take care, folks, and I'll see you in the next video.